Hey everybody, Alex from SCADA Forge here. In this video, we're going to go through some gold certification level database topics. First off, we're going to look at running database queries in a script and to show when you want to use prep queries instead of just regular query calls. Because you can parameterize your prep query calls and get out of a SQL injection attack risk. So I set up a simple screen here to show a few things. So we have a username and password field, and we have a read query button and a write query button for non-parameterized or non-prep queries, and parameterized or prep queries for both. So if we look at our script here on the non-parameterized read button, we're going to grab the username and password from our text fields on the screen. Then we're going to select everything from our injection example where our username is equal to, and then we have a quote here. Then we add that to our username value, and we manually construct our password field here. And we'll populate that with what our query is, and then we'll run that query using a system.db.run query. And you will see in 8.3, run named query, run scalar query, and run update query are all deprecated, and they suggest using exec query and exec update instead. And those run a named query, which also gets around all of this by automatically parameterizing everything. So you probably won't see these in new 8.3 projects because you would probably use exec or exec update and use name queries. But if you're upgrading an old project or using an older version where these were your best options and you're not using named queries, this will give you that functionality. So what we can do is I have this injection table or injection example table set up with 3 usernames and some passwords. So if we were to go through and put in, say, admin and pound password 1, and we do our read, this will select everything from injection example where username is admin and password is pound password 1. And if we do the parameterized query, that looks roughly similar. We're just clearing out our table data here, grabbing our username and password, and then we're setting up a query with our parameters, which are indicated by the question marks. Then we use system.db.run prep query and pass in our query and then our parameters here. And what this will do is on the back end, it will go through in the JDBC driver. It'll effectively use these prepared statements to pass those parameters in and set everything up. And using those parameters will prevent a SQL injection attack, which we'll show here in a minute, by passing those in as parameters and not allowing you to modify the query here, even with whatever you put into there. So let's try operator just to make it a little different and put pound password 2. We'll run our parameterized query, and that pulls everything in. Now, if we want to do a SQL injection attack, we can put this in for our username. And what this will do is it will, let me pull this up. It will take the first part of the query, it will end this quotation mark and put in or 1 equals 1, and then comment out the rest of the query. And we can see that when we populate the query down here. And what this will do is, with this or 1 equals 1, that will always evaluate to true. So we will pull in all of the data from the database. So we're effectively saying, select everything from injection example where username is empty, or 1 equals 1, which is always true. And then we don't even care what the password is because we have commented that out with our double hyphens here. And that will return everything from the table because we're basically saying select star from injection example where 1 equals 1. And if we run our parameterized query against that, it's passing in the parameters and not allowing us to modify the query directly. So it returns nothing because there's no username in the table that matches that with that password. So that will allow you to avoid SQL injection attacks. So to test our writing to the database, we can put username, just put in password for the password, and we'll write to the database here. We'll build up the query, grab our username and password, then we'll set up insert into injection example, username and password. Then we'll start to build our values here with an open quotation mark. Put in our username, we'll close the quote, then we'll open a quote for password, we'll pass that in, close it, and add our parentheses in. And then we will run that whole query. And if we look at injection example, we'll see that that got added to the system. And if we do a parameterized query, we're building up the same thing. We're just passing in parameters instead of building the query manually. And we're doing a run prep update and passing in those parameters here. So if we make this test update prep, and if we go to parameterized, click that button, we'll see that our user gets added, and here's the query format that we're using. Now, let's create a new table. Called drop injection example. Just give that an ID of integer type and hit create. And now we see that that table is created here. And I just pre-wrote these queries to test everything out. So if we come to test update prep and we enter this, which will give us a username and a password, it will end that query, and then we'll drop our drop injection example table and comment out the rest of the query here. We can run that with our non-parameterized. Our new table, or our new query, becomes insert into injection example username password, pwned and password, then drop our drop injection table example. So if we refresh this, we'll see our drop injection example went away. Oops, let me do that, and we do see that user got added. And if we create that table again, execute that, we'll see that we have that table, and now we can do our parameterized query, and that will pass in our actual username here with password as the password, because this whole field gets converted to a parameter and no longer does anything there. And let's say we wanted to be a little more malicious. Maybe we want to do delete from injection example in our non-parameterized query. Let's paste that in for our username. And now we will delete everything from that table and drop our drop injection table example, which is gone. And now we have deleted everything from that table. So that shows how using non-parameterized queries can really bite you. It may require that somebody knows your database structure a little bit, but that can really bite you if somebody knows what they're doing by just passing in a query that you would not expect. So I would, in general, not use any non-parameterized queries and use prep or prep update if you're in an older version and want to do things in scripting, or use named queries, which by default give you parameters. We don't have any parameters defined for this query, but this will basically force you to use parameters, and then we can run that. This will pull all of our unshipped orders. We'll get into that in Ignition 3.02. And if we want to show how that works, we can come back to our view and just copy and paste this button. Duplicate. Duplicate. Nope. There we go. And we can call this named query. And we'll come here. And we can just take all this out for the moment. And we will run, or we will system.db.exec query. Call this get unshipped orders. And we don't have any parameters for that, so we can just run that as is, and we don't need any of the other fields by default. So this basically forces you to use parameterized queries, the exec and exec update, or exec query and exec update call named queries, which is a little bit more of a secure way to manage things. And if we click that, then we see our table populate with the results of that query. The other thing we can do is let's just put in admin #password1. Oh, we don't have any data in that table since I deleted it. The other thing we can do with named queries is if we want to do a property binding, say on this table for our data field, that's how you have to use things for query bindings. So we can come down here and do our get unshipped orders query and set up if we want that to update over time, which we'll go through in some of the videos. And we can hit OK. And we can use named queries to bind to things. And then if we want to do the same thing where we're writing to a database, let's just do a new query, add user to injection example. We'll create a named query. Change this to update. Let's put username, password, and make that a string. And we'll do insert into injection example, password values. And in the named query editor for using parameters, you just put a colon in front of the parameter name. So if we want to put in, say, admin and pound password 1 and do an execute, we'll see that that gives us a value there. And if we do that, we're good to go on our query working. So then we can, let's do, duplicate this button. And we'll make this named query right. This will be exec update and add user to injection example. And then we need to pass in a dictionary. So we will go username. We'll pass in our text field text property. And password. Pass in our password field text property. And we're good to go there. And then we need to save the project. Since our named query was in italics, it's not available yet. But now if we come here and go operator pound password 2 and we write that, we see that that user gets added to the database. So that example shows you how to use named queries to read and write from the database, as well as non-parameterized queries and parameterized queries, although all of those are deprecated, so at some point those will be removed from the system in favor of using named queries. And the other benefit to named queries is you can use those across projects, so you don't necessarily have to write a query every time you're using it in scripting. And then if you make a change to that query in the project, it will apply to anything that's referencing that using the exec and exec update functions. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about database interaction in Ignition. And as we've used in various videos, the database query browser lets you manage a lot of these things through the user interface here. You can also do things through scripting. We can also do the script console if you're doing any testing or anything, writing scripts. So thank you for watching and have a great day.